The text message came in at exactly 6:32 p.m. on March the 15th, 2024. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone that I believed deserved something far more significant than a digital shorthand decorated with little cartoon hearts. My wife Beverly wrote, "Stuck at work. Big deadline. I'm so sorry, babe. Happy 10th anniversary. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Love you." She had even added 3 heart emojis and a kiss face emoji at the end of the text. It was the polished, casual lie of a woman who had been betraying me for 14 months and had gotten so comfortable with it that she could dress her deception in the vocabulary of romance. I stared at the phone screen, the bright white light illuminating the dark interior of my cab. For over a year, I had noticed the small shifts in her behavior. The late nights, the sudden passwords on her devices, the quiet phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I had convinced myself it was just the stress of her promotion to senior accountant at Croft Developments. I had told myself that marriages go through dry spells, that 10 years of partnership meant trusting your partner through the seasons of high pressure and long hours. I was wrong. I was sitting in my pickup truck in the parking lot of Bastions, a high-end French-American restaurant on East Carey Street in Richmond, Shockoe Bottom. The truck was a 2016 Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles on the odometer. It smells like coffee, copper wire insulation, and WD-40, the permanent perfume of a man who worked with his hands for 10 hours a day. I was wearing a charcoal suit I'd bought 3 days ago specifically for tonight. It wasn't from a high-end department store. I'd bought it at a consignment shop on Broad Street because a master electrician running a small business doesn't have a luxury budget. But a man's 10th wedding anniversary only happens once, and I wanted to look like I understood the weight of that. I wanted to look like a man who was proud of his life, proud of the woman he had spent a decade with, and proud of the home they had built. I had flowers sitting on the passenger seat next to me. They were stargazer lilies, Beverly's absolute favorite. They were the same flowers she'd carried down the aisle at our wedding, and I had made it a point to have them delivered to her office every March 15th for 10 years. This year, I wanted to deliver them in person. I wanted to hand them to her at the table, watch the expression on her face, and see if she still looked at me the way she did when she was 29 and I was 32, standing in a quiet church in Church Hill promising each other forever. I remember that day like it was yesterday. The sun was shining through the stained glass windows and she looked like an angel. I had vowed to protect her and provide for her, and I had spent the last 10 years doing exactly that, working early mornings and late nights, climbing into dusty attics and damp crawl spaces to wire panels so that our children would have a safe home and a secure future. I read the text message again. Stuck at work. I almost started the engine and drove back home to our house on Montrose Avenue. I almost called my buddy Keith to see if he wanted to grab a cheap beer at a local tavern and watch a baseball game. I almost let another evening slip away into the familiar routine of a husband whose wife was always busy, always working late, always just out of reach. But I had already paid a non-refundable deposit of $80 for the reservation. When you run a small contracting firm, $80 is still $80, and I couldn't bear to let it go to waste. I decided to walk inside, eat a quiet dinner alone, order a glass of something decent, and toast 10 years of marriage by myself. I told myself it would be a quiet night of reflection, a chance to think about where we had been and where we were going. I walked into Bastions at exactly 8:10 p.m. The restaurant was housed in a restored 19th century tobacco warehouse, with exposed brick walls, gas-lit lamps, and the rich smell of garlic, butter, and expensive wine. The hostess led me to a small table near the back, right next to a window overlooking the alley. It wasn't the most romantic spot in the house, but it suited a man dining alone on his anniversary. I ordered a glass of Barolo, laid the lilies on the empty chair across from me, and opened the menu. Then I looked up, across the dining room, partially hidden behind a carved wooden screen that separated the main floor from a private corner alcove. I saw a black dress. It wasn't just any dress. It was the black designer dress I had bought Beverly for Christmas 3 months ago, from a boutique in Carytown. She had tried it on in our bedroom, spun around, and told me she was saving it for a very special occasion. She was wearing it tonight at Bastion's. On the anniversary, she was too busy to celebrate with me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared through the gaps in the wooden screen, hoping, praying that I was mistaken, that it was just a similar dress worn by a woman who happened to look like my wife. But as she turned her head to laugh, the warm candlelight caught the slope of her jaw and the small gold pendant around her neck, the one I had given her for her birthday. It was her. She was sitting across from a man with silver-haired temples, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck. He was leaning forward, his hand resting over hers on the white tablecloth. There was a bottle of champagne resting in an ice bucket, and they were holding two of those thin-stemmed crystal flutes you only see in places where people throw money around like water. I knew who the man was from photographs Beverly had shown me. It was Pierce Croft, the CEO of Croft Developments, the real estate mogul who ran the firm where Beverly worked. He was a man of immense wealth and power in Richmond, someone who lived in a massive estate in the West End and was regularly featured in local business magazines. He said something, and she laughed. It was the unguarded, genuine laugh she used to give me when we were younger, before the silence took over our home. Then she leaned across the table and kissed him. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a long, deep kiss, the kind that had history, intention, and a clear promise of what was going to happen after dinner. I couldn't breathe. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, the soft jazz playing from the speakers. It all faded into a high-pitched ringing, like the sound a high-voltage wire makes right before it arcs. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the edge of the table. My vision narrowed until I could only see that black dress and the man holding her hand. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, a heavy current surging through my chest that threatened to tear me apart. I stood up. I was going to walk over there, flip their table, and look my wife in the eye on our 10th anniversary to ask how her deadline was going. I was ready to make a scene that every customer in that room would remember for the rest of their lives. I didn't care about the consequences. I only wanted to confront the lies that had dismantled my life. I took 2 steps before a hand clamped firmly onto my forearm. "Sit down," a voice said. It was low, female, and completely calm. It had the steady, unyielding quality of someone trained to keep their head when everything around them was burning down. The grip on my arm was surprisingly strong, not aggressive, but heavy with authority. I turned around, my vision blurry with anger. A woman in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, was standing next to me. She wore a navy blazer, a simple white blouse, and a functional watch with no jewelry. She had the posture of someone who had spent decades standing in rooms where authority mattered. Her face was calm, and her gray eyes were fixed on me with absolute stillness. "Let go of my arm," I muttered, my voice shaking with rage. I tried to pull away, but she didn't budge. "Sit down first," she replied, her voice remaining steady and quiet, barely carrying over the sound of a nearby diner laughing. "Lady, I don't know who you are," I said, "but my wife is sitting over there kissing another man, and you're about to get in the middle of a very bad situation." She didn't raise her voice or tighten her grip. She just looked at me with still gray eyes. "I know who that man is. I know who your wife is. I know exactly what is happening at that table. And I need you to sit down because the real show is about to start." There was no hesitation in her eyes. This woman wasn't guessing. She knew things I didn't, and her confidence was as solid as a load-bearing wall. I slowly sat back down. She pulled out the chair across from me, next to the wilting lilies, and sat down. "My name is Nora Hale," she said, sliding a business card across the table with 2 fingers. "I'm a licensed private investigator. I was hired 3 months ago by a woman named Miranda Croft. She is the wife of the man your wife is currently kissing. His name is Pierce Croft. He is the CEO of Croft Developments, the real estate firm where your wife works as a senior accountant, and their little affair is about to cost him everything." I stared at the card. It had a simple logo and a local Richmond phone number. Across the room, the waiter was bringing Beverly and Pierce a second bottle of champagne. My anniversary flowers were sitting in the empty chair, and a private investigator was telling me that my marriage was just a footnote in a much larger corporate war. The shock was starting to blunt the sharp edge of my anger, replaced by a deep, hollow confusion. "I need you to explain this to me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I will," Nora said, "but first I need you to give me 30 minutes of patience. Do not approach them. Do not confront them. Do not let them see you. My colleague is outside with a camera, and another is at the Jefferson Hotel, where Mr. Croft has a standing reservation in room 412. If you blow up this restaurant right now, you'll get a loud argument and a scene. If you wait, you'll get the leverage you need to survive what's coming." "What is coming?" I asked. "The truth," Nora said, "and it's a lot worse than just a cheating wife. Order another glass of wine, take a breath, and let me tell you what I've uncovered." I ordered the wine, forced myself to breathe, and listened as Nora Hale laid out a betrayal that made the physical affair look like the least of my problems. Nora explained that Pierce Croft was 52 years old, running Croft Developments using the massive family fortune of his wife, Miranda. Miranda's family owned 80% of the parent company. Pierce had a history of workplace affairs, including one 3 years ago with his previous executive assistant, Sonia Corwin. That affair had ended in a quiet settlement, but it made Miranda suspicious. When they married, Miranda had insisted on a strict prenuptial agreement containing an infidelity clause. If Pierce was caught cheating, he would forfeit his shares, his executive position, and face a massive financial penalty. Beverly started working at Croft Developments in 2018. Nora continued, leaning in closer. "According to my surveillance, the affair began 14 months ago, in January 2023. But it wasn't just an affair, Victor. They've been using you." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "Using me? How?" Nora pulled a document from her folder and slid it across the table. It was a copy of a subcontracting agreement between Croft Developments and my company, Vance Electrical Systems, for electrical work on a luxury commercial high-rise on Canal Street. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature that looked exactly like mine, written in dark blue ink. "I never signed this," I said, my chest tightening. "I didn't bid on this project. I've never even met Pierce Croft." "I know," Nora said. "Beverly forged your signature. This is a forged contract. Under Virginia Code Section 18.2172, forgery is a Class 5 felony. And because your signature was forged without your knowledge or consent, these contracts are void ab initio, meaning they are legally void from the very beginning. They have no legal force, and you cannot be held liable for them." But Pierce and Beverly didn't care about that. They used this contract, and 5 others like it, to submit fake invoices to Croft Developments. She slid a bank statement across the table. It was a personal account at Virginia National Bank in Beverly's name only. I looked at the transactions. Every single month for the last 14 months, there was a deposit of exactly $15. Zero originating from a shell company called Croft Advisory Services, LLC, an entity controlled by Pierce. "They've run $210,000 through this scheme," Nora explained. "The money was siphoned out of Croft Development's construction budget, which is funded by Miranda's family trust, and funneled straight into Beverly's secret account. They were setting you up, Victor. If Miranda's auditors ever discovered the fake invoices, the paper trail would lead directly to Vance Electrical Systems. Pierce was going to claim you were running a kickback scheme, submitting inflated bills and split billing them. Beverly was going to file for divorce, accuse you of financial crimes to gain sole custody of your kids, and leave you to face federal fraud charges while she and Pierce walked away with the money." I sat frozen, looking at the bank statement. The balance was $211,847. For 14 months, my wife had been sleeping with her boss, forging my name on illegal contracts, and setting a trap that would have destroyed my business and taken my kids away from me. I had spent those same 14 months working 60-hour weeks, crawling through damp crawl spaces and wiring commercial panels, wondering why my wife seemed so distant and tired. I had felt guilty for working so much, thinking I was the one failing the marriage. In reality, she was using my hard work as a cover to destroy me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Your client is Miranda Croft. Why help me?" Nora looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Miranda wants her divorce, and she wants Pierce removed from the company. My job was to find the proof of the affair and the financial misconduct. We have that. But Pierce and Beverly tried to use an innocent local business owner as their fall guy. I was a detective for 14 years before I went private. I don't like when bad people ruin good men. The evidence of the forgery and the secret account is yours to use. It helps Miranda's case because it proves Pierce was embezzling marital funds, and it helps your case because it gives you the ultimate shield. She tapped the forged contract. Because this is void ab initio, Pierce has no legal claim against your business, and the state will view Beverly's actions as a criminal conspiracy. You have the leverage now, Victor, but only if you stay calm. If you go over there now, you alert Pierce. He will call his lawyers, shred documents, and clean up the accounts before we can freeze them. Let them leave. Let them go to the hotel. Tomorrow morning, you go to a lawyer. I looked across the room one last time. Beverly was leaning in, whispering something in Pierce's ear. He smiled and kissed her forehead. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. The anger didn't vanish, but it turned into something solid and sharp. I stood up, left cash on the table to cover my wine, and picked up the Stargazer lilies. Thank you, Nora, I said. Get a good lawyer, Victor, she said. The kind who doesn't mind a fight. I walked out of Bastions into the cool March air. I didn't look back. I drove home, paid the babysitter, and went upstairs to check on my children. Jared was 8, sleeping with his arm thrown over his baseball glove. Ruby was 5, curled up under her pink blanket with her favorite stuffed rabbit. I stood in the doorway of their room for 20 minutes, watching them breathe, and promised them that no one was going to take them away from me. To understand why Beverly did this, you have to understand who I am. My name is Victor Vance. I was born in 1980 in Church Hill, one of Richmond's oldest neighborhoods. My mother, Lydia, raised me and my 2 brothers alone on a postal worker's salary of $38,000 a year. She walked her route for 31 years, through freezing rain and humid summer heat, teaching us that the only things that belong to you are the things you build with your own hands. She never complained, even when her knees were swollen and the winter wind cut through her uniform. She taught us that integrity was a man's most valuable asset, and that once you lost it, you could never buy it back. I started Vance Electrical Systems in 2009 with a single-used van and a $12,000 loan from a local credit union. I worked hard, built a reputation for honesty, and by 2024, I had 8 employees and a steady stream of contracts. I wasn't rich, but I made about $110,000 a year after payroll and expenses, enough to buy a modest home on Montrose Avenue and provide a good life for my family. My employees were like family to me. We took care of our clients, and we never cut corners. I met Beverly in 2012. She was 29, working as a junior accountant, and she seemed to appreciate my work ethic. We married on March 15, 2014, at St. Patrick's Church. For the first 8 years, our marriage was solid. We had our disagreements, of course, mostly about money or how to split the chores, but we always resolved them. But when she took the job at Croft Developments in 2018, things began to change. She became enamored with the wealth and status of the corporate world. Pierce Croft was a wealthy man who owned a yacht and flew to the Caribbean, and next to him, a master electrician with dirt under his fingernails must have looked small. She started buying expensive clothes, talking about investments she didn't understand, and looking at our modest life with a growing sense of dissatisfaction. The next morning, I called Quincy Taggart. Quincy was 53, a veteran divorce attorney and former military prosecutor. His office was in a restored historic bank building on Main Street, featuring heavy mahogany desks and rows of leather-bound legal volumes. He reviewed the documents Nora Hale had sent over, his brow furrowing as he read through the financial trail. "This is incredible," Quincy said, tapping the forged contract. "They really thought they could pin this on you. But they made a fatal error. In Virginia, a forged signature makes a contract void ab initio. It has no legal existence, they cannot sue your business, and they cannot claim you were part of a joint venture. Furthermore, under Virginia Code Section 20-107.3, the secret account with $210,000 is a clear case of dissipation of marital assets. Beverly siphoned marital funds for her own benefit. During the property division, the court will credit that entire amount to your column. We will freeze that account by the end of the day." Quincy explained the legal depth of this strategy. Because the contract is void ab initio, it is as if it never existed in the eyes of the law. You are completely insulated from the fraud Pierce Croft was executing. Beverly's role in this is not just marital misconduct. It is criminal. We will coordinate with Miranda Croft's legal team. They are filing their own divorce petition today, invoking the infidelity clause in Pierce's prenuptial agreement. He is about to be stripped of his position and his assets. When we file your divorce petition, we will attach the evidence of the forgery. The judge will see that Beverly participated in a criminal conspiracy to frame her own husband. That will be the end of her custody claims. What about custody? I asked, my voice tight. That's all I care about. The money doesn't matter. I just want my kids. A mother who commits felony forgery to frame the father of her children is not going to get custody, Quincy said. We will file for sole physical and primary legal custody. Under Virginia Code Section 2124.3, the court must evaluate the moral climate and the integrity of the parents. Beverly's actions demonstrate a complete lack of moral fitness. With this evidence, the judge will grant it. Trust me, Victor, we have them cornered. We filed the papers on April 3, 2024. Beverly was served at her desk at Croft Developments by a professional process server, right in front of Pierce Croft and the rest of the accounting department. The process server was polite but firm, handing her the thick envelope containing the divorce petition and the emergency motion to freeze her bank accounts. When she came home that evening, she was hysterical. The front door slammed, and she marched into the kitchen where I was sitting. Victor, what is this? How could you do this to our family? You're suing for sole custody? Are you crazy? You served me at work. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten dinner for 10 years, where Jared did his homework, and where Ruby drew pictures of our family. I had a single glass of water in front of me. I looked at her, noting the expensive handbag she was holding, likely bought with the money she had stolen. I know about Pierce, I said quietly, my voice calm but cold. I know about the 14 months. I know about the 11 visits to room 412 at the Jefferson Hotel. I know about the 47 surveillance photographs, and I know about the forged contracts. She stopped yelling, her face turning pale. The anger evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer terror. What forged contracts? The ones you signed my name to, I said. The ones you used to steal $210,000 from Croft Developments and hide in your secret Virginia National Bank account. Under Virginia Code Section 18.2-172, that's felony forgery. Quincy Taggart has already frozen the account, and the contracts are void ab initio. You and Pierce tried to frame me for your embezzlement scheme, Beverly. You wanted to send me to prison and take my children so you could run off with your millionaire boss. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor, weeping and begging for forgiveness. She reached out to grab my knees, but I pulled my chair back. It was Pierce's idea. He pressured me. He said we could start a new life together. He said the company would never notice the missing money. Please, Victor, don't do this. Think of the kids. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with him today. I'll quit my job. I am thinking of the kids, I said, looking down at her. That's why I'm keeping them. You chose Pierce, you chose the money, and you chose to destroy me. The marriage is over. You need to pack your things and leave. You can stay with your sister. She stayed on the kitchen floor for a long time, crying until she had no tears left. Eventually, she realized that I wasn't going to budge. She packed a suitcase and left the house. I went upstairs, checked on Jared and Ruby, and made sure they were asleep. They hadn't heard a thing. The legal battle took 5 months, but it was entirely one-sided. Quincy Taggart was relentless. Beverly's attorney tried to argue that the $210,000 was a performance bonus and that she had simply kept it in a separate account for tax purposes. But Quincy presented the Croft Advisory Services LLC documents, proving the money was funneled from a shell company controlled by Pierce, with no corresponding tax documentation or corporate justification. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Harris, was completely unimpressed. She ruled that the money was marital property that had been dissipated by Beverly and awarded the entire balance of the account to me to offset our other assets. Because of the forgery, the judge granted me sole physical custody of Jared and Ruby, with Beverly receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The house on Montrose Avenue was awarded to me. Beverly was ordered to pay child support, though she had no job to pay it with. But The real damage occurred at Croft Developments. Miranda Croft's attorneys presented the evidence of Pierce's affair and embezzlement to the board of directors. The board immediately terminated Pierce's contract as CEO. Under the terms of their prenuptial agreement, Pierce's infidelity clause was triggered. He lost all his shares in the company, was stripped of his board seat, and was forced to pay Miranda a $3 million settlement. To make matters worse, Miranda turned the financial evidence over to the Commonwealth's attorney. Pierce, Croft, and Beverly were indicted on charges of grand larceny, corporate embezzlement, and forgery. Beverly, realizing she was facing 10 years in prison, agreed to a plea bargain. She pled guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit larceny and received a 5-year suspended sentence with 5 years of active probation. She was also stripped of her CPA license, meaning she can never practice accounting again. Her career was over, and her reputation in Richmond was completely ruined. Pierce Croft refused to take a plea. He hired a team of expensive defense lawyers and went to trial. But the evidence Nora Hale had gathered was airtight. He was convicted on all counts and was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. He went from living in a mansion and running a multi-million-dollar company to wearing a state-issued jumpsuit and eating prison food. It is now March 2025, 1 year since that night at Bastions. The anniversary of that betrayal has come and gone, but I didn't spend it mourning. I took Jared and Ruby to a pizza parlor on Broad Street. We ate pepperoni pizza, played arcade games, and laughed. My business, Vance Electrical Systems, is doing better than ever. I hired a 9th employee, a young apprentice named Darius, who is eager to learn the trade and reminds me of myself when I was starting out. My mother, Lydia, who is now 69, retired from the post office and comes over 3 times a week to help with the kids. She stands in my kitchen, making her famous fried chicken, and reminds me that a well-built foundation can survive any storm. You handled it like a man. Victor, she told me recently as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. You didn't make a scene. You let the wire short out on its own. If you had fought him in that restaurant, you would have ended up in jail, and Beverly would have taken the kids. Instead, you waited, and you let the law do its job. Jared is 9 now, and his baseball coach says he has a great arm. Ruby is 6, in 1st grade, and she still fights me every morning when I try to brush her hair, but I just smile and remain patient. They are safe, they are happy, and they are with the father who stood by them. They have contact with their mother on her visitation weekends, but she is a shell of her former self, working a retail job and living in a small apartment. When my son rides with me in the truck on job sites, he asks me questions about my tools and the wires we run. Dad, he asked me the other day, how do you know when a circuit is safe? You test it, son, I said. You trace the lines back to the source. You make sure there are no hidden shorts or bad connections. And if the wiring is rotten, you tear it out and start over. That's the only way to keep the lights on. I look back at that night at Bastions, and I realize that Nora Hale was right. The patient path is always the hardest, but it is the only one that leads to real justice. What would you have done if you were in my shoes that night? Would you have confronted them in the restaurant? Or would you have stayed calm and let the trap snap shut? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next one.